Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Aminatou or Aminatou, the Veil Piercer. Aminatou is a 4-mana human wizard 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 2, and then each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. And Miracle is just, you may cast a card for its Miracle cost when you draw it if it is the first card you drew this turn. So, this is some top decking enchantment miracles. So I play Aminatou. She's cool because we're able to set up our draws every turn. Just when we have the Surveil 2, that's really good, and then that in turn enables our miracles. She's also great by helping us hit our lands, because in Esper, there's really not a ton of ramp. So just making sure we're hitting our land drops when we need it is very important. The reduced by 4 is massive. It's so big. Just because it's also, most of our enchantments that we put in the deck are meant to be reduced either to just essentially cost like 1, 2, or 3 mana. Like we're probably just paying color pips. So that's what she's going to do. And it also really just lets us play 2 big spells a turn. Like one's practically free from Aminatou, and then one is just what we would normally play for turn anyways. It's very interesting and unique gameplay because in a typical game, you're worried about what's going on your field, your lands, your creatures, what your opponents have going on. But Aminatou adds what's going on with the top of our deck. It adds like an extra interesting layer of what's going on. And then we're also able to forge our own luck a little bit by making miracles happen, because there are a lot of cards that just straight up search our deck for a card and put it straight on top of our deck, which we can then miracle. So here's the game plan. We don't need her. We don't need her to win. We get slower gameplay and we get worse draws and cards set up without her. Everything costs a little bit more without her, but we don't really need her because at the end of the day, we're just Esper enchantments. So early game, we want to slow opponents and set up. Aminatou comes down at turn 4, which is kind of late. So early game, we want to be kind of a little bit more controlling. We want to just like slow things down a little bit. Mid game, we're just going to want to play Aminatou, start setting up our draws so then we can start miracling things out. And then late game, we're going to play our huge enchantments for basically free. We're going to make a lot of tokens to beat down with them. We're going to animate our enchantments, and we're going to steal some of our opponent's things to win the game. Channel and deck stuff. The deck's like $622 at the making of this video. It's a bit pricey, but there are some cards you can just get rid of. Like Ancient Tomb is like a $70 card. Spoiler alert for later. Just cut that, minus $70. A little bit more affordable. There's a handful of cards like that. You could just make this deck way cheaper. Get the cards you need from the link down below, and then as always, like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel. Going into creatures, we have Alayla, which is a flying death touch lifelink fairy warlock. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0, and then whenever you cast an artifact or especially enchantment spell, make a 1/1 blue flying fairy, which is really a 2/1 flying. So Alayla is kind of the way we win the game, right? It's at least the most reliable way we win the game, where we're going to just play a bunch of enchantments. Ideally, in a turn, we're playing one for like 1 mana with Aminatou, and then we're just casting another one for regular turn. So ideally, we're getting like 2 tokens every turn, with like 2/1 flyers every turn. It's nice just to like beat down. Arcana Sun's Grace is basically the same thing, because whenever an enchantment enters, we just make a 2/2 flying Pegasus with lifelink, and the Archon itself is a 3/4 flying lifelink. So we want to make a lot of tokens, just beat down. Aetheros, again, is a good example. Aetheros is just going to cost 2 mana if we can miracle him. He has the whole god thing, indestructible, whatever. At the beginning of your end step, put a coin counter on another target creature. And then whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies or is put in exile, return that card to the battlefield under our control. So 2 options. We can either get extra protection and say put it on Arcana Sun's Grace. So if Archon dies and has a coin counter on it or gets exiled, we get it right back. Or we can put it on an opponent's creature, and then when that creature dies or gets exiled, we get that to our field. Demon of Fate's design, again, always assume when you see the big enchantments, they're reduced by 4. So ideally, Demon of Fate's design costs black. Flying and trample 6/6. Once during each of your turn, you may cast an enchantment by paying life equal to its mana cost rather than paying mana for it. So it basically lets us lose some life, get a free enchantment, and then we can pay 3 mana, sacrifice another enchantment to give him plus X plus O until end of turn, where X is the sacrifice enchantment's mana value. Let's paint a picture. Omniscience. Omniscience is in the deck as a spoiler for later. Of course it is. So, in a weird way, we could pay 10 life to have Omniscience, which is probably not that great, but it's still actually pretty good. I would pay 10 life for Omniscience. Then, let's say we attack with Demon of Fate's Design. It's a flying trample, 6/6. We have no blocks, pay 3 mana, sacrifice Omniscience. It's now a 16/6 with trample. That could just straight up kill someone. It's practically swinging for like half of someone's life. That's really good. Heliod the Radiant Dawn. When he enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your hand to your graveyard. I think excluding Heliod, we have maybe 2 gods. We already saw Aetherus. I think we might have another one. So it's just good reanimation, real easy. And then we can pay 3 life and 2 Phyrexian, or 2 life and 3 mana, because why pay mana for Phyrexian when we can pay 2 life, to flip him as a sorcery. And then he flips into, you may cast spells as though they had flash, and then spells you cast cost 1 less for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So the way he works is really, we don't play spells during our turn anymore, because we can just play them during our opponent's turn. So our opponents are going to draw for turn. It already is going to make all of our spells cost 1 less anyways, so we might as well just play it during our opponent's turn. Because 1, it happens at instant speed, we can do it in response to whatever, and then also they're cost reduced, so it's good. Mesa Enchantress, whenever you cast an enchantment, draw a card, it's good. Ondu Spirit Dancer is whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a token that's a copy of it, do it once each turn. That can go kind of nuts when we get like bigger enchantments going on. 2 Omniscience is pretty cool. Again, just doubling up the first enchantment we cast each turn is good, especially when we can miracle it, so we're getting like a big 5 mana or 6 mana enchantment twice is cool. Starfield Mystic is just a cost reducer, and then whenever an enchantment is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we get a 1/1 counter on him, so it gets a little bit bigger. So it gets better the longer he's around. Thassa, God of the Sea, has the whole god thing. At the beginning of our upkeep, scry 1. It's nice because it lets us go 1 more deeper, when we do the whole miracle thing with Aminatou. And then we can just make a creature unblockable this turn, which is really cool. Thought Render Lamia is definitely a pet card of mine. 6 mana, 5/5, 5/3, which is really a black 5/3 if we miracle it. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent discards a card. Now, that sounds pretty bad, and at that rate it is. However, when we miracle this out and then we're playing like other small enchantments, like making our opponents like discard, I would say on average every time it's our turn, like 2 cards or so, 2-3 cards, is really, really good. Like just locking down our opponents, giving them less options to deal with whatever we have is really good in my opinion. We have Zur, Eternal Schemer. Flying enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, and then pay 2 mana to make a non-aura enchantment you control a creature in addition to its other types and give it base power toughness equal to its mana value. So just as he exists, cards like Thassa and Thought Render Lamia, all our enchantment creatures, just have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. Good luck targeting them. And then we can animate one of our enchantments essentially permanently for 2 mana, and then give that creature Death Touch, Lifelink, Hexproof. Using Omniscience as an example, let's paint a picture. Someone tries to Anguish Unmaking or gets rid of our Omniscience. What we can do is, instead of having that just die or get rid of forever, we can pay 2 mana to make it a Death Touch, Lifelink, and give it Hexproof, so that will fizzle, and now we just have a 10/10 with Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. It's pretty good. Going into sorceries, we have Brilliant Restoration. The 4 white's very steep. Returning all enchantment cards from our graveyard to the battlefield is pretty steep. We have a couple artifacts, but not super relevant. But yeah, it's good. Dance of the Manse is essentially the same thing. Return up to X target artifacts or non-aura enchantments. I don't think we have any auras, so don't worry about that. With mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, they're just 4/4s in addition to their other type. So early game, even if we're just like, oh yeah, I really got to get back, let's say, I don't know, Rhystic Study went to the graveyard. Yeah, I'll pay 5 mana to get Rhystic Study back. Or late game, you can be like, yeah, I'll pay 8 mana to basically reanimate my entire grave and have it be 4/4s, which will kill someone next turn, which is real good. Devastation Tide. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, and it has Miracle. So here's the thing with Miracle, right? Miracle gets around timing restrictions. Let's say hypothetically we draw a card during our opponent's turn, and that card we draw is Devastation Tide during our opponent's turn. We can reveal it and cast it for its miracle cost at instant speed despite it being a sorcery because we miracled it. So Miracle gets around that. So return all non-lands to their owner's hand. It's real good. Entreat the Angels sucks when you're hard casting it. When you're paying, let's say, 5 mana for a 4/4 flying, that's not that great. However, when we miracle it, paying 5 mana for 3 4/4s of flying at instant speed is really good. Idyllic Tutor just searches our deck for an enchantment, puts it into our hand, reveal it, shuffle. It's good. We just, if we want a good enchantment, we get it. Temporal Mastery, take an extra turn, exile it, and it has Miracle. One of the ways I was thinking about building this deck was by adding a lot of extra turns, so we could basically start miracling a lot of things into play. But I don't think it would be that fun, so I decided against it. But since Temporal Mastery already has Miracle, I couldn't resist but put it in. So again, we can just take an extra turn for 7 mana, not very good, or we can Miracle it for 2 mana and take an extra turn for 2 mana. It's pretty good. And then the final one is Terminus. Same idea with Devastation Tide. Just if we can Miracle it, we can get rid of all creatures, which is really good. It's for us because we're mostly enchantments. We can rebuild faster when all of our enchantments are still around, all around. Going into instance, Anguish Unmaking, exile target non-land. We lose 3. Who cares? We're getting rid of something we don't like forever. Arcane Denial. Let me paint you a picture of this. I love painting pictures. Counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. You may draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Now, let's say hypothetically, we have a card with a Miracle on top, or we have an enchantment that Aminatou gives Miracle. Now, let's say we go to our turn, we go to person A's turn, we counter their spell, we go to person B's turn. Since we're drawing a card, and that is the first card we drew that turn, if that card has Miracle, we can cast it for its Miracle cost at instant speed. So if it's an enchantment, if it's like the Terminus, or if it's Temporal Mastery or whatever, anything with Miracle, we can cast at instant speed because it's the first card we drew that turn. So that's kind of a theme going on in this deck, of just drawing a card during someone else's turn and then casting it for its Miracle cost. We have Brainstorm. Here's a tricky thing with miracles, right? Is one, Brainstorm is just good in general. But if we have a card that we want a miracle and it's in our hand, we can't really cast it like for its Miracle cost. It's just stuck. So Brainstorm is good because it'll just like basically put cards, we draw 3 and then put 2 cards back on top, which is good. So if we have a big enchantment and let's say we do this on person, I don't know, B's end or C's end step, and then it's our turn, we can just fix our hand real quick and then miracle what we want, which is good. Or vice versa, if we have a Aminatou, we can also get rid of some pesky cards we don't want, which is also good. Consider, it's good. It's the whole cast a miracle at instant speed. So for 1 mana, surveil 1, see if it, basically look and see if it's a miracle. If it is, leave it on top. If it isn't, get rid of it. Draw a card, cast it for its Miracle cost. Counterspell, counter something we don't like. Cyclonic Rift is just good because we have a lot of instant speed stuff, which is kind of nice. So just paying 7 and getting rid of everything that isn't ours is really good. Dovin's Veto is an uncounterable counter for most things in the game. Enlightened Tutor searches our deck for an artifact or enchantment and puts it straight on top, and we can just miracle that out later. Enlightened Tutor is great because if you get Enlightened Tutor turn 1, you're tutoring up Sol Ring. That's pretty much just what you do with it. Late game, it's good because it's you put what you want on top, and then we miracle it right away. Opt is basically the same thing as Consider. Scry 1, is it a miracle? Yes, leave it on top. No, put it to the bottom. Draw a card, cast it, miracle it. Radical Idea, same idea, Opt to Consider. Drawing a card at instant speed if it's a miracle. And then what we can do is it has Jumpstart, so we can cast it again by discarding a card, which is good. So we can just kind of miracle twice. It's like a 2-for-1 almost. Vampiric Tutor, search our deck for any card and put it on top. This is what you want to use if you want to take the extra turn. If you want to look up like Temporal Mastery, right? Then yeah, we're going to put that on top, take an extra turn for 2 mana and see what's going on. But really, we just get any card we want and see if we can miracle it. Void Ren, short, sweet, to the point, can't be countered, destroy something. It's good. Going into artifacts, we don't have a ton. We have Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone, just 2 mana artifacts that just tap for whatever. It's important that they're 2 mana because we want to have them be as low costed as we possibly can because we want Aminatou to come down as soon as possible. And also late game, we don't like, Early game, they're good because it lets us play it faster. And like late game, we don't want to be paying like 3 mana for something we're really not going to get a ton of benefit out of. Lightning Greaves, toss it on Aminatou, give her Shroud. It's good. Mind Stone, taps for a colorless, but we can sacrifice it and draw a card at instant speed. That's the whole instant speed miracle thing. Sensei's Divining Top is super good. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order, so we can always figure out what we want to miracle from the top 3 cards. And then, even better, we can draw a card at instant speed, put Sensei's Divining Top on top if we do need to cheese out a quick miracle. Also, Sensei's Top is very difficult to get rid of, because if you target it, you just put it on top of the deck. So you need like 2 kill spells or something with like split second, but it's really good either way. Soul Ring is Soul Ring, adds 2 mana. It's great. Going into the big enchantments. Anointed Procession, we make a lot of tokens in this deck, so we'd like to double them up. That's pretty much that. Also, you can imagine all these cards cost reduced by 4, which is cool. Black Market Connections. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1. Make a treasure token, draw and lose a life, draw a card, lose 2. Make a 3/2, lose 3. So you can choose to lose 6 and do all of that. Generally, I think it's best to just make a treasure and draw a card. 3 life is not that big of a deal. And getting an extra card and an extra mana is a really big deal. We can make a 3/2 in a pinch if we want to block. And even if we have Anointed Procession out, honestly, making 2 3/2s isn't that bad. Blind Obedience is good just because it has Extort, which is, Extort. Pay 2 mana, artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, which is good because we don't have a lot to deal with creatures going super wide at us, so it's nice to really slow down on opponents and give us an extra turn to figure it out. Boon of the Spirit Realm. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield, put a counter on it, and then creatures you control get +1/+1 for each boon counter on it, which is good because we want to go wide with tokens and stuff. Copy enchantment, have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any enchantment on the battlefield. That's ours or opponents. So if we have something really cool, we now just have 2 of it. Estrid's Invocation is basically copy enchantment, arguably a little bit better. Estrid's Invocation copies an enchantment, only ours though, not just any on the battlefield, but it also has, at the beginning of our upkeep, we can blink it, and then it'll enter, as a copy of an enchantment. So we could even have Estrid's Invocation enter as a copy of copy enchantment and then copy someone else's thing, which is kind of neat. Ethereal Absolution. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1. Pay 4. Exile target card from an opponent's grave. It's a creature. You get a 1/1 with flying, which is really a 2/2 with flying. Ethereal Absolution is super cool, just because it's like a baby Elishnorn that also is graveyard hate, and it makes our it's cool. And then Extravagant Replication can even copy it. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. So we could just essentially get an extra Ethereal Absolution every single turn, or an extra Ghostly Prison every single turn, or an extra whatever every single turn with Extravagant Replication. And again, that only costs 2 mana. So even like late game, having 4 Ethereal Absolutions is like, oh, yep, your opponent's creatures get -4/-4, and your creatures get +4/+4. You're swinging in with 5/5s at the very worst, which is really good. Ghostly Prison, again, we don't want people to attack us early game, so taxing them is good for it. It de-incentivizes it. Grey Betrayal costs 4 less, which is really good. Whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under our control with a 1/1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step, and then it's a zombie. So whenever an opponent's creature dies, we just get it with a 1/1 on it. It's good. Greater Auramancy to give our other enchantments Shroud. Enchanted creatures have Shroud, but it doesn't really matter because we don't have any auras. But yeah, other enchantments you control have Shroud, which is good because it protects everything. Hallowed Haunting. As long as you control 7 or more enchantments, creatures you control have Flying and Vigilance. That's pretty easy in this deck. I think just not including creatures, we have like 26 enchantments. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a white Spirit Cleric creature token with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of spirits you control. So they get bigger and bigger, right? So you cast an enchantment, you get a 1/1. You cast another one, now you have 2 2/2s. You cast another one, now you have 3 3/3s and 4 4/4s and 5 5/5s. And then those 6 6s all have Flying and Vigilance. So it can close out games pretty easy. Mind's Dilation. Whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of their deck. If it's a non-land, we cast it without paying its mana cost. Excellent. And again, it's steep. It's a steep cost. However, it's reduced by 4, so it's really only 3. Omniscience, you make out non-land cards from your hand without paying a mana cost. Truly, what else could you want in a Magic card? It does cost 10, so now it really costs 6 when we Miracle it, which is still pretty steep, but Omniscience is just so crazy it like hardly matters. Opalescence is a fun way to win the game. Each other global enchantment with is a creature with power and toughness equal to its mana cost. It's still an enchantment. So basically, everyone's enchantments become a creature with power and toughness equal to its mana cost. So Mind's Dilation, so looking at this screen, we have a 7/7, a 10/10, and a 4/4, right? That we can just crash in with. It's a very cheeky way to win the game, I will say, because you can just go nuts. Painful Quandary punishes opponents. Whenever they cast a spell, they lose 5 life unless they discard a card. They're either losing their hand or they're losing 5, and 5 is like, again, an eighth of your life, so that's like no joke. Propaganda is the same as Ghostly Prison. Don't attack us. We just don't want you to. Rhystic Study. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless they pay 1. And here's the cool and bad thing about it. The bad thing about it is everyone's always going to pay a 1. However, if they don't pay the 1, we're going to draw a card during that player's turn most likely, which means we can Miracle that top card just by drawing it. So it's cool. Shark Typhoon. Whenever you cast a non-creature, make an XX shark with flying, where X is a CMC. We can also cycle it and make a little dude to draw a card if it's like early game. But again, this guy only costs 2 mana with Aminatou, so it's really good. Sigil of the Empty Throne is whenever we cast an enchantment, get a 4/4 with flying. Sounds good to me. Smothering Tithe, the Smothering Tithe, it's just so good. Pretty much if you have a white deck, you can put Smothering Tithe in it and it'll be really, really good. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, create a treasure. The card's necessary in the deck, really just because we don't have a ton of ramp options. And we kind of need our opponents to either slow down what they're doing or give us more mana. Seer Safety, creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, or X is the number of enchantments you control. It's good. No one wants to attack us and spend like 10 mana per creature because we're going to have a lot of enchantments. Starfield Nyx is at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Beautiful. Wonderful. As long as you control 5 or more enchantments, each other non-aura enchantment you control, it's basically Opalescence. So at the beginning of your turn, reanimate an enchantment. If you have 5 or more enchantments, it's Opalescence. Real good. Storm of Saruman's a really cool card. 2 mana basically, because, cost reduced by 4. Ward 3, so you can't really target it. That basically says hexproof. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it, except the new copy isn't legendary, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So the way I envision this card is you do the miracle cost, right? You pay like 1 or 2 for a card. You do that, right? And then you play your next spell for turn, and then you copy that with Storm of Saruman. So you basically already get the first spell for like 1 or 2 mana, and then you get the next one. Like if you're dropping like Seer Safety, we now have 2 Seer Safeties, so good luck with that. The final 2 enchantments are the virtues. We have Virtue of Loyalty and Virtue of Persistence, which are really good because if they're in our hand, we can do the instant speed and the sorcery part of them, which is making a 2/2 knight with vigilance, or just giving creature -3/-3 and gaining 2. Or when they're on top of our deck or in exile, we can cast them for the enchantment part, which can be cost reduced and miracle. So at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures and untap them. Or at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. So they're good when they're in our hand because we still have stuff we can do, and they're good when they're in our deck because we can miracle them. They're good. Going into lands, I didn't do too crazy about the lands, so I just put all the check lands. I put all of the shock lands. I put all of the battle bond lands. I put all of the surveil lands because I think they're flavorful. I put all of the vow hunt lands because I think they're fine. They're probably always going to enter untapped. And then going into the real meat and cheese of the lands, it is nothing crazy. We have Ancient Tomb, just get 2 mana, deals 2 damage to us. This is on the plan if we don't have Aminatou, right? A lot of our stuff does cost a lot. So if we don't have Aminatou, we need to have the extra mana to be able to do stuff. Arcane Sanctum enters tapped and it taps for any of our colors. Command Tower enters untapped and taps for any of our colors. Hall of Heliod's Generosity is cool because we can, on someone's end step or even like an instant speed, we can put target enchantment card from our graveyard on top of our deck, and then we can basically just miracle it, which is great. Rafine's Tower, it's everything. It's plains, islands, swamp. It enters tapped, taps for all of our colors. But we can also pay 3 mana and cycle it and then draw a card, which then starts drawing a card. We can miracle it if it's the first card we drew that turn. Reliquary Tower to give us no max hand size. Going into the remaining basics, it's just 5 islands, 6 plains, and 4 swamps, because we're primarily a white heavy deck. I believe that totals up to like 36 lands and some mana rocks, which is good. But that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching. Get the cards you need from the link down below. And as always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you next time.